Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us for the International Euphonium Summit 2023 beginning series of Daniel Hohm from Germany. And we thank him and thank you for joining us. Thank you, Daniel, for spending this time to really dive deep on your musical experiences from childhood till whenever, forever, how long we may do this. Hopefully, many years and into the decades, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for joining us. And if you're watching us from Germany or anywhere else, let us know where you're watching us from on this video cast. And if you um, got to dive into the a shorter end of the deep dive behind the scenes, go listen to the podcast in full length. And yeah, so, Daniel, thank you for joining us. On your website, it says age 5 piano. How did you get into piano?
That was quite simple. My sister was already playing piano and she's 9 years older than me. So the thing was standing in the living room and I always tried to have a go at it, but obviously if you don't have lessons, you have no idea where to start. So I just asked my parents, can I please have lessons? And then they said yes, and I started when I was 5.
Awesome. So, your sister, at the age of 13 or 14 or so, started playing piano. Does she still play piano by chance?
I think she started even earlier. Must have been 6 or something. And she does still play, but she also plays cello and sings. She's not a professional, but it was very inspiring for me when I was a child to have music in the house.
That's awesome. So if she went to cello, a lot of people notate those that are catching this as a first introduction to the International Euphonium Summit. Other interviews and conversations, we bring this up a bit frequently. Cello and euphonium is the cello of wind ensemble. Seeing that euphonium isn't really part of the orchestral composition as of yet, and those like Daniel are making a difference and working his way into the orchestral world. I'm just assuming as such. Um, it sure looks like it that that may be one of your ambitions here shortly. So, with that being said, um, what was your mind like when you started learning and taking piano lessons?
Hmm. I think it was just being able to express yourself because music is something I like to get lost in at the piano. It's a bit different. It's always been different playing euphonium and piano for me. But piano, because it's something you usually just do on your own, you can get very deep inside. Um, yeah.
So, do you find yourself in coming into a present day like mindset? Do you find yourself getting lost in your own practice with euphonium, like you did when you first started playing piano? I'm just curious.
I think it's different now because it's much more structured and planned. So hmm, I'm more productive in a sense, but I'm trying to keep that sense of very intimate connection to music when I'm performing. And I think if if you need any help for anxiety, nerves at the performance, just go very deep inside the music and you'll be safe.
Huh. That's really cool. That's a really good perspective. So, why did you what what happened during age 9 and 10 where you transitioned and wanted to play euphonium? What was your inspiration? What was that like? Was that a school choice?
There was a local wind band at the little village I grew up in Germany, and they went to the school and they presented the instruments. Uh, I had to go at a couple of instruments, and then I asked my parents, "Can I please play euphonium?" And they went like, "Okay." They had no idea what it was, but they just said yes, and so I started. Yeah, but it wasn't like I stopped playing piano. Piano was kind of the big thing for quite a while after that, and euphonium just grew into becoming something, well, I'm more and more passionate about.
Well, that's really spectacular. So when you first started practicing at home, and um, I let's see, your sister is 9 years older. She must have already left the house when you started playing euphonium. Is that correct?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
Okay. Have you when you brought home the euphonium, what was it like practicing at home, or did you just practice at school?
No, I practice at home very much. I I was never someone who practiced very long, and I'm still not. But I used to have that routine of, I don't know, 20 minutes for the first 4 or 5 years of just doing. Well, I had good teachers, and they told me do this exercise, practice this solo, and so I just did what I had to do. I never got really I never spent hours on a little section or trying to fix everything. But I think it was that routine of just keeping playing and keeping improving that, yeah, helped me.
So when did I must okay, so going back to piano and taking lessons helped you structure your euphonium practice sessions. Uh, when did scales become a important kind of daily rudimentary, foundation for you?
Mm, what exactly do you mean?
Scales. When did they become important to you?
Scales. Mm, hmm. That's a good question.
Was that during when you were starting with piano?
Kind of, yes, but I never really transferred it to euphonium. I think the hmm, it hasn't really been much before going to uni that I really had to focus on technical things. So really doing scales maybe 4 years ago.
Okay, that's fair. So that's really cool. So what was your practice routine like when you first started euphonium? Then
Well, I had that book. It was a trumpet book actually, and there were a lot of exercises. And I had lesson, and then my teacher told me for next lesson prepare number, I don't know, 8, 9, 11, 12. And so I just played them through once or twice every day, and that was about it.
oh, okay. Um, so what kind of sight reading did your band do as you're progressing through secondary then primary school? How did that go?
Hmm. I think sight reading is really, really crucial. And I've been doing some in my lessons. So we used to get a Bodoni etude out. I love Bodoni. It's great. And I just sight read it. My teacher did the piano accompaniment, and we tried to make music. So that was really important. And then in wind band was good, but the euphonium part wasn't really challenging. So I learned to sight read, but not to sight read hard stuff. And now that I'm in the UK playing in brass bands, and there's really challenging stuff, you need to sight read. That's really improved, and yeah.
So taking where you are currently, and we'll catch up on later series with your career. What would you take? What you know now, and like, if you could take a few elements of what you know now and put it back uh, into your first starting euphonium, what elements would those be? Like, would you have started scales? Would you have started like what would those be?
I thought about this question. I think it's very easy to say you should practice very productively from an early stage, do your technical exercises, but I think that's a bit too easy because that's not how it goes. You might become a technical prodigy if you do it, but I think you're just gonna hate music. And so I think everything you do in your practice and your musical life has to come from your love to music. That's the starting point. And that's something I should have done more. Playing more music, being more passionate about it, exploring more repertoire. But I wouldn't say more technical exercises, no.
Hmm. How did your parents support you emotionally during your first years playing euphonium in supporting this passion and love for music?
Well, I think what they really did and what's so valuable is showing genuine interest in what I was doing. And I think it I can't imagine it has sounded good in any way. Like beginner euphonium doesn't sound good. Could be worse. Uh, but there's no way they've actually enjoyed it. So yeah, I think just that support of someone believing in you, that's so important.
That's a really good key aspect and really important for. I think it's pretty important for our beginner artists and especially the parents that are listening to or watching this podcast or here on the video is knowing how or in which way they could support their rising artists, even if they decide not to continue with their studies of euphonium or their particular instrument. It's just being there and supporting in watering their passion, kind of like watering the plant. Um,
Yeah, yeah.
Fascinating. So when you first started high school, primary school, um, how did like solos and um, when did you start ramping up your practice regimen from, let's say, 20 minutes? Did you always did you you mu- I it leaves me kind of speechless to where you're practicing out of passion rather than forcing yourself to really hunker down and just hammer down the keys, right?
Hmm. Yeah, definitely.
So how did you find those moments daily to actually go in and practice? Is that a mindset that you prepare yourself for before you go practicing?
Yeah, I think there's another key element to improving, and that's a routine. So that's not just what you practice, it's also coming home from school and then doing your practice. So that was nothing I had to force myself because it was just the thing I did after I came home from school. Um, and it's also for the elements of practice. I mean, you can force yourself to do any technical exercise, but you can't force yourself to enjoy it. So that element of passion and love, that's something you can train. And if you always do it, it becomes a routine.
Sure. So were there days in your since age 10 that you'd come home and really have a rough day and not so great day at school and really had to kind of take out those hardships and focus back on to, okay, this is, you know, that mindset change is where I'm looking at finally getting to say the question here. Um, did you have any hard days where you just felt like not practicing?
Mm, well, I'd say yes, definitely. But I think there there are a number of reasons why you wouldn't want to practice, and there are a couple of ways how to deal with it. So if you're just very mentally exhausted, you might just want to play, improvise, try out something, and not do your technical exercises. And I think that's something that's okay. If there's a day you don't have the mental capacity, just don't do it. And I still do it these days when I have a practice session and I just feel like, okay, I'm not concentrated enough, but I want to make music. That's something you have to just allow for yourself. Um, there might also be days where you want to get into technical stuff because you're emotionally exhausted,
Mhm.
and that's also fair. So I think the it's very important to be flexible. If you feel what's going well, what's not so going well, just adjust, and do what feels good.
So it sounds like you have a mentality of like being patient with yourself and forgiving yourself for, you know, stuff that might come up during the day, and allowing yourself that room to breathe in a way.
Yeah, yeah, definitely.
Hmm.
I think that's very important. If you might practice something for weeks and it might not improve, and that's just normal. And in other stages of your development, you might just learn something within an hour. That's how it goes.
Fair enough. Fair enough. So what what was it like preparing yourself like to graduate high school and graduate primary school and moving on through life? And I guess since you went to the Royal College of Music, what was that? What was that transition like for you? How
Hmm.
did
So
you? Yeah.
I'm still a student here at the Royal Northern in Manchester.
Yes.
So that's not that long ago. And it's just, well, it's a big transition from living in a small village in Germany, going to school, living with your parents, and then being on your own in a big city, a different country, doing something completely different. It's very big, and it's hard. It is hard. Um, and well, I made a schedule for myself. I was like, I want to improve these technical parts of my playing, and I looked for exercises, and I never ever stick to it. It didn't work out.
Okay.
Um, I think a lot of my practice was just learning pieces, and then when I needed technical support, I did exercises that helped me with it,
Hmm.
but I never managed to stick to a rigid schedule, which isn't a bad thing.
So what has worked for you?
Hmm. I think it's, I'm a big fan of flexibility. So do have a routine, but be very flexible in it. So if I do my warm up, I play a lot of scales and modes. It's just great, and there's so much to explore. But I do them, well. I spontaneously decide on what order I do, dynamics, articulation. There are many parameters you can change, and that's something that helps with learning. Because if you're bored of it, and if you're just acting like a machine, that's not how your brain's going to memorize things. Um, so I'm trying to be very intentional with my practice. That's the main thing. And I make kind of a flexible plan. I've got that much time. I'm gonna do this and this, and then I just stick to it, or change bits of it. But that's kind of how it goes. Obviously, it has sort of the danger to overlook long-term goals. But if you just make it very obvious to yourself what you want to achieve in a couple of years, that's something that works.
So you're talking about long-term goals and setting yourself up for maybe a couple years down the road. What is that one goal that you're shooting for a couple years down the road for yourself and or for your playing? What would you like to see happen?
Well, first of all, I just want to be a really, really good musician, and there's a lot of areas I can imagine working in. I'm probably going to do some conducting, some teaching, a lot of playing, um, and I mean, there's obviously a lot of areas to work on,
Sure.
but the main thing is music, and that's very important for me.
Now you mentioned in your bio, and as we're wrapping up this little segment, this minuet with Daniel Hohm here, um, you mentioned poetry as an inspiration for yourself. Do you find yourself, where you're currently at up there, uh, reading more poetry than before, or have you not been able to um, really enjoy much poetry since you've been up there?
Hmm. It's well, the I think what makes poetry special for me is that I also write myself.
Oh, okay, cool.
Um, and that's something if I compare it to music, I've never really had education in composition, so I don't really know what it's like to write a piece of music. Um, but I know how long it takes to write a poem, how much thought goes in there, how much actual skills, language skills you need to have to form it. And that's something that just changes my view on art. I think if we practice something, we tend to just see the technical side at the beginning. What notes do I have to play when? Just trying to give that, well, page of music, whatever, sort of, well, graphical reading, so you can check mezzo forte, tick, accent, tick, which is just a starting point. And then it's very, very crucial to go beyond that step and think about what does the composer want to do with it. Most pieces have great program notes. Just read them and think about what's the intention behind this concerto, whatever. What does it want to say? What does this passage in the music do? What do I need to transport in sort of emotions? These are the questions, and I think that poetry really helped me to kind of understand that connection between writing and reading, between composing something and playing.
That's cool. When did that, like, with your passion with poetry and your passion with music? When did you start looking at the intentions of solos for euphonium? When you actually went to go play a particular solo or a particular piece, when did you start looking at the emotion of the piece?
Hmm. I think it must have been maybe when I went to college 2 years ago. I think before it's not. it's not that I didn't care about styles and how to play music, but I was mainly listening to recordings, trying to reproduce and getting input from my teachers and trying to do what they told me the music was about. Um, but kind of, well, thinking about music myself started 2 years ago.
That's fair. So who's your first euphonium teacher, by chance?
My first one in history or
For
no?
actual like learning how to play and grow on the euphonium for yourself.
So I'm studying with Stephen Mead at the moment, and he's well, he's not just great because he's a good player, but he's so much in touch with all the euphonium repertoire that exists, and that's something I haven't experienced before. I had a couple of teachers, and they all kind of didn't know much about the euphonium, and
So
so
were those first teachers not euphonium players?
uh, my very first teacher was a euphonium player. She was the conductor of my local wind band, but she she wasn't very in touch with the euphonium world. And then my second teacher was well, he's a great conductor, was a trombone player, and he knew about brass bands, so he had that sort of approach to euphonium, which really helped me. Then I had two teachers. One of them played trombone at a professional orchestra, which really helped. And he played euphonium when he was younger, but he also wasn't that much in touch with the original euphonium repertoire. And I had another teacher who is a tenor horn, which is sort of the German euphonium. He's a great soloist, and he played euphonium for a long time, but he's also not that much, well, in touch with the recent developments. And so that's something that makes, well, Manchester studying here and having Stephen Mead as my teacher a big difference.
So what when you mean in touch with music and where it's at now, what are you looking to kind of grab hold of in terms of the euphonium performance and the repertoire? Where would you like to see euphonium material uh, being developed? Where do you see that?
Hmm. I think we, well, there's an obvious disadvantage about euphonium repertoire. It's that we don't have a lot of old music in that sense. Uh, but it's also very much a great thing if you think about it, because we have contemporary music. We basically just have contemporary music, and there's a big opportunity for us to see the variety that's out there, and there might be some, well, most pieces going in some sort of semi-classical directions, of being very similar, very standardized. And I hope that we just broaden the spectrum of literature we're playing, kind of just trying out that weird piece that's been written, pieces that involve weird notation, a lot of pieces that go into kind of pop music direction.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just great to see how everything mixes.
So, would you like to see for yourself like opportunities to um, accentuate that dynamic of euphonium performance, like grow
Yeah,
those
I mean,
experiences?
I think when I get to play solos, I just try to do a different thing every time. I think that's especially as long as you're learning and you don't want to say, I'm a euphonium player who plays the whatever Philip Spark solos. You want to say, I play everything, uh, and that's the thing. Yeah.
Fascinating. So, um, what would you say is your favorite style of music that you listen to currently? Not play, but listen to and take in as inspiration.
Hmm. I'm I'm very much a person who doesn't like pop music, so I don't listen to a lot of stuff that's on the radio, something. I do listen a lot to brass band music, mainly because it's what I'm doing. Lots of great test pieces that are contemporary music,
Mhm.
and then just looking into pieces that don't require euphoniums. There's so many great classical pieces of music, and
What's
I'm
your
not saying
favorite?
you. Oh, there are so many. I don't have favorites,
Okay, fair enough.
but but I do also like contemporary classical music, which isn't something you have to like, but I think it's crucial to be aware of what happens in music.
So when you go to select, when you go to play, like let's say a solo piece, and congratulations on landing the principal spot, the principal euphonium spot for Leyland Band. Um,
Thank you.
what how do you approach learning solos for certain concerts?
Hmm. Yeah, I think, well, the first step is very simple. It's just getting all the notes and rhythms in the right order. I mean, that's basic. So at that stage, you can actually play the solo, and then you think about, well, what is it going to be like when I play? Is it, I don't know, just imagining that church, how many people are going to be there. Um, and that's something you need to be mentally prepared. Um, uh, so you just don't get, I don't know, surprised, nervous in the moment. Um, and I'm a big fan of mental practice.
Hmm.
I like just to imagine how it is standing in front of the band playing to, I don't know, 200, 300, 500 people, and then doing it in my head.
Hmm. I look forward to our next conversation for the this series covering your career in particular, Daniel. I'm looking forward to your growth over the next few years, decades, however long we're able to do everything that we do in this daily life, and to see your growth over the next uh, upcoming seasons, even with the position as principal euphonium for Leyland Band, and then over the course of your entire career, seeing where you traverse and you go and you adventure and uh, you begin to um, have um, the honor and privilege of uh, seeing uh, the next generation and imparting your all your wisdom apart to and getting to share that musicianship that you're developing, even up to these later years in my own personal life, and um, musicianship never stops growing, and I look forward to seeing that aspire and inspire future generations, especially with uh, letting them see where you're at now and how it progresses over the years and over the times and that mindsets that refine themselves with each version. And I like your going back to what you said a few moments ago was being patient with yourself. And
Oh, yes.
I really appreciate you bringing that dynamic in to this conversation and, uh, in a way, forgiving yourself for, you know, for not being able to be fully present. But when you do come into that practice moment for our younger musicians, to know that it's going to be okay regardless of you being ready to practice. Just the fact that you're starting to buzz, that you're starting to blow that warm air into your instrument, warming up, you're actually letting yourself release what has happened before and bring in that new mindset, that new refreshment that playing
Mm,
euphonium and just
yeah.
learning something that's that may not necessarily be your main interest right now as far as like sixth, seventh grade, like in U.S. terms, like secondary schools and elementary schools. Um, you may not be all that great, but being patient with yourself in this growth period and seeing the artists like Daniel grow through their journey and being willing to be vulnerable to even share on this summit for you, for those parents that are nervous about sending their kids across the pond, across, into a different world altogether. I can't wait to dive into that on our next uh, addition to Daniel's series here, and seeing how that plays into, because being away from family, whether you're a parent or a student artist, it does take a moment to process and to come back to where you are presently.
Mm,
And I would really appreciate you sharing this time with us for the current and future euphonium artists, musicians around. Um, Thank you so much, Daniel, and thank you, everyone. As we're going to wrap the video segment up, go back into the podcast. If you're still there, thank you for hanging out with us. Until next time, we'll catch you on the podcast and see you next time, everyone. Thank you so much.
thank you.